Alright guys, so here we are on the next part of the Sentry Gun TUT, and we're just going to start doing our UV mapping. Just wanted to mention before I get started that I've actually upgraded to Max 2012, so I'll be using that for the remainder of the TUT. And I hate to switch right in the middle of the tutorial, but I just upgraded my PC and I pretty much had to switch to the newest version, so hopefully that won't cause you any problems. For the most part, I'll still be using standard mapping techniques, and I'll try to stay away from the new tools if I possibly can. I'll be using some of them just to speed up the workflow a bit, but for the most part I'll just be using standard techniques and probably pelt mapping on most of this, so you shouldn't have any problems following it either way. So let's just get started here. I'm just going to change my shading and let's actually get rid of our color. So I'm just going to open up the material editor and reset my material slots by going to utilities, reset material editor slots. Just get rid of those materials we had, and we'll just grab all our pieces here and just throw on a gray shader. And we have quite a few pieces to map. Obviously it's going to take some time to do. The good news is that for the most part it's symmetrical, or at least the bottom is, so we can just work on one side and then copy our UVs over to the other side. So I think I'm going to start with the front legs. Let's just grab those. I'm going to hide everything else. So right click, hide unselected. And these are still grouped and they have a symmetry modifier applied. So I'm just going to ungroup them. And we'll just grab the foot pad down here, and I think I'm going to start down at the bottom. So we'll grab that and go into isolation mode. And it still does have the symmetry applied to each piece, so I'm going to delete this for now. And we'll just work on one side and copy it over after. Alright, so let's check on Unwrap UVW modifier. And this is pretty simple. I'm just going to cut off the bottom cap polygon. So let's go to Edge. I'm going to use point-to-point seam here. The interface has changed quite drastically from what I'm used to, so yours may or may not look like this. So you might have to hunt around for the buttons. But point-to-point seam should be there somewhere. So just grab that and just click on a vert on the bottom edge loop and just follow that loop around, just clicking on random verts until you cut the seam all the way around. Alright, and one thing I have noticed with Max 2012 is it's quite hard to see your pelt seams, as you can see here. It's almost impossible to see that blue, so just turn off your edges if you're not sure. If you went all the way around, and you can see I didn't, so I'm just going to follow that around all the way. And we're going to just split the side as well, so I'm just going to cut on any edge loop just up to the top and right click to end the seam, so like that. Alright, so let's drop into face. I'm going to grab the bottom polygon and we'll just do a planar map on this. So I'm just going to click planar map and then turn it off, and then we'll grab a poly on the side, expand our selection to the seams, and you can do a pelt map here if you want, or a cylindrical map. I think I'll just use cylindrical, so we'll just hit that and then turn it off. And let's actually maybe get a material in here that we can see how our mapping looks. So I'm just going to open up the material editor, grab a new slot. We'll open up the diffuse map box, choose bitmap, and have a checker, a map here I made in Photoshop. And if you don't have one of these to use, you can grab this on Studio Tuts in the tutorial details section at the top of the page. So we'll open that up. I'm just going to change my tiling to maybe 15 by 15. For now, we'll hit show on viewport, and I'm just going to drag and drop this over here. And just in case you're not very experienced with UV mapping, I'll just kind of run through this. The reason I'm using a checker pattern, and that's a common technique, is just because it's really easy to see if you have any distortion in your mapping or any stretching. And you can see the bottom here looks perfectly square, and that's correct. If you look up on the side faces here, you can see it's completely stretched out. So it's always a good idea to use some sort of checker image when you're doing your UVs, just so you can kind of see what's going on a little easier. So let's just open up our editor window. And this has changed quite drastically from what I'm used to as well, so hopefully I won't fumble around too much, but I'll do my best. So I'm just going to drag this chunk of UVs over here. Let's turn off our checker background so you can see. And we'll just open up the relax tool as well. So go tools, relax. And I'm just going to change my settings here. I'm going to take my amount up to 1, and you can up your iterations if you'd like to. The relax mode here, I'm just going to change from edge angles to face, and I find that works a lot better than edge angles. They've actually removed the option in here to set default settings for some reason, so unfortunately we're going to have to change these every time we open up a new piece. Alright, so with the side polygon selected here, I'm going to actually squish these down using scale. So I'm just going to change my scale to the vertical mode, and you can do that just by holding down the left mouse button. Select the bottom one, and I'm just going to squish these down. And I'm just keeping an eye over here. I want these to be as square as I can get them. That's generally the rule of thumb. And typically you want your UV islands to kind of mimic the shape of your polygons on the model. So we have a long, thin strip of polys here. So we want this to be long and thin. All right, so I'm just going to take it down like that. Another thing I'll just mention, just in case you haven't seen any of my previous tutorials or you're not sure about this, you can see there's a drastic difference between the checker sizes here. We have little tiny ones down here and huge ones on the side, and generally what you want to try to do for the most part is kind of match the checker size across all the pieces or all your UV chunks. And by doing that, you'll ensure that the texture comes out with an even resolution on all your pieces. So what I mean by that is if you have a massive piece like this and a little tiny piece, one piece is going to be high res, obviously, because it's taking up more of the texture map or more of the 0 to 1 space. And this isn't taking up as much, so it's going to be lower res or blurry, and there's going to be a different difference between the two pieces. So yeah, you definitely want to go over it and just kind of even everything out. So what I normally would do is just use uniform scale, and I just scaled this piece up until those checker sizes got pretty close to the same size. And again, if you've seen any of my previous tutorials, I've done that, and it's pretty hard to watch. It takes absolutely forever doing it that way. So I will be using one of the new features in Max 12, which is the Rescale Elements option, just to speed this up. So if you click this, what it does basically is it just scales everything to a uniform scale, and you can see that these pretty much match now, for the most part. And that's a really cool new feature. It speeds you up immensely. If you don't have those new options, just grab your pieces and just kind of scale them manually. It will take a little bit more time, but it's still definitely doable. But I will be using that feature just to speed it up so you don't have to watch me scaling stuff up and down. Alright, so with that stretched out, let's actually maybe just do relax on these. So I'm just going to grab that bottom chunk, relax it, and we'll grab our side piece here and just relax. Kind of even everything out. I'm just going to hit the rescale again. And this still seems a little bit buggy, so sometimes you have to hit it a couple times. And you can also see that I have a broken seam up here, so I'm just going to weld this back together on vertex. So we'll change the vertex. I'm just going to take off select by element, and we'll just right click, select target weld, and I'm just going to weld this vert up to this one, and just move this up until it's fairly straight. And generally you only want to see green edges around the outside of your UV islands. That indicates a broken seam, so you don't want to have any green edges in the middle. If you do, just go along and weld them together until they're all black, like that. But that looks good, so let's grab edge. I'm just going to stitch this back together, so I'm just going to grab a random edge on our strip, right click, and stitch selected, put them back together, and we'll just grab this on polygon with element turned on, and just move our whole chunk out of the way. I'm just going to move it out of the 0 to 1 and just leave it up here. And I'll just leave the scale as is for now, and I think I'll do most of my scaling at the end. So we'll just close that, close up the rollout, exit isolation mode, and there's one piece completed, so we'll just move up to the next part, which is the foot. Same thing here, I'm going to go isolation mode, Alt-Q, just delete the symmetry modifier, and for this we're going to have to hack it up probably into 3 or 4 pieces to get it flat. So let's start up on the top. Just going to cut off these cap faces, so let's put the unwrap on. And when I do that, you'll notice I have these weird seams cut into the model here randomly, and I'm not sure really what caused this. Max sometimes just does this when you apply the unwrap modifier, so that usually indicates that there's going to be a break in the UVs, so it's just something to pay attention to when you open up your UV editor. Just again, go in and make sure you don't have any green seams in the center of your pieces, because that's going to mean that it's going to break in the UVs. And it's easy to fix. You can just weld the stuff together as you go. There is a new modifier in Max 12, which is the UV mapping clear. I'll just show you what that does. I'm just going to delete the unwrap for a second. I'm going to apply this first, and then convert my model to editable poly again, and then apply the unwrap UVW on top. And you can see now there is no seams. It just kind of clears everything out. I don't really know what causes that. It's been kind of a glitch in Max for a long time, so if you have the UV mapping clear option, I'd recommend using it. If you don't, just be mindful of that as you're going along here. And I'll mention it again as we go. So let's drop into our unwrap UVW rollout. Just select edge, and I'm just going to grab an edge on the inside here, and hold control and grab it on the outside at the bottom of the chamfer. And I'm going to use the loop option here. And I'm not sure if this is a new feature. I think it is, but it might have been in the last couple versions of Max. If you don't have that loop feature, just use the point-to-point seam feature and just cut the seam around the inside and the outside like we did on our first piece. Either way will work, but I'll be using loop because it's quicker. So we have our 2 edge loops selected, and you can just hit the convert edge selection to seam button, and that'll actually cut those into seams. Alright, so we'll do that, and we'll move down to the bottom here. I think we're going to have to cut this into 2 pieces, so I'm just going to grab an edge on the bottom of our chamfer here, loop it, and then hit the button. Cut that into a seam. And then we'll move down to the bottom. I'm just going to do the same thing I did on the top. So we'll grab an edge here, and then one on the inside, loop them, and convert to a seam. Okay, and then we're going to need to split it vertically as well. So let's just grab a vertical edge somewhere and do a loop. Convert to a seam, so you have a vertical split all the way up from the top to the bottom, and you can see it cut across the cap pulleys here. On the bottom, we don't really need this to be a seam, so I'm actually going to remove that. So I'm just going to go over here to Edit Seams, and we'll just click Alt and just deselect these. All right, and we'll do the same thing on the top. Just Alt click them. And we're going to planar map those, so that's why we don't need to have this split. All right, so that looks good. That's all we really need to do. So we'll just start on the inside of the hole here, and we'll start flattening it out. So I'm just going to grab a polygon on the inside somewhere. You can toggle your shading on with F2 if you can't see that selection. Expand our selection to seams, and we can just do a cylindrical map on here. So we'll hit cylindrical. If your gizmo doesn't look like it fits your faces, just hit fit or try the align options until it looks like this. And then just turn it off. Move to the next piece, grab a polygon, expand the selection. We'll just do a planar map here for those guys, and we'll move down to the side, just grab another polygon, expand the selection. For this, I think I'll probably use pelt, so I'm just going to click on pelt map. And this has changed a bit as well, but it basically works the same as always. Just start the pelt, let it pull itself out a bit, and then just hit commit or OK. And we'll just move this up and out of the way. And we'll move down to the side, grab a polygon, expand the selection. We can do a cylindrical map here as well. So just hit cylindrical, turn it off, grab a face on the next piece, expand the selection, planar map this one. And finally, we have that little strip on the inside of the hole here. So we'll just grab a face there, expand it, and cylindrical map that again. All right, so let's throw our checker pattern on so we can see what we're doing. And we'll just start sorting these out. So again, I'm just going to turn off my background by clicking the little cube up here, and I'm going to turn on by element. And that'll allow you to actually select a whole chunk of UVs instead of just single faces. And I'm just going to drag my pieces out. Okay, so there's the top and the bottom and our side piece. And I'm just going to rotate this so it's kind of straight. One thing to note is if you're trying to rotate your UVs and it's in increments of 5 or 10 or whatever, that's actually because this is turned on up here, the angle snap options. So if you untick that, you'll have more control. All right, so just kind of straighten it out for the most part, and we'll just open up the relax box again. Change our mode to face angles, up our amount to 1. You can up the iterations if you like, and we'll just relax the side piece here. And this is probably going to twist up just based on the shape of our model here. So I'm just going to do it a couple times, and we'll see if we can kind of straighten it out. All right, and I'm just going to stop this, and you could leave it bent like this. It doesn't necessarily have to be perfectly straight. It does take up a little bit more UV space, obviously, if it's bent into this weird shape. So I'm just going to quickly straighten this out, and I'm going to use another new feature, which is the reshape elements option over here. I'm just going to hit this straighten selection button. And what that does is actually straighten it in both directions, as you can see. It's perfectly straight. And that's a new feature, I believe, in Max 2012. If you don't have that, what I'd recommend checking out is the Unwrap Tools script, which you can find on Google if you search it. I think I might have a link on my personal site, christainalign.com, to it as well. And that'll just give you some extra options in here, and you'll have the ability to straighten out vertex selections and so forth. So you can do this manually if you want to. If not, just leave it bent. Doesn't really matter. And by leaving it bent, it actually will probably be more correct, because as you can see over here, if we look, we have some waviness in the checker pattern. These are also square down here, but then as they get closer to the top, they taper and get smaller, and that's just due to the shape of our UVs here, or our model. And typically, like I said before, you want your UV islands to kind of mimic the shape of your UVs. So this really should be kind of bent and tapered in, and that would remove it, but it takes quite a bit of time to actually get it perfect. So I think just for the sake of speed, I'm going to leave it flat like this, even though it's going to give us a little bit of distortion. But that'll be up to you. If you want to take a little more time, just straighten it out. But I'm going to move to the next piece, if I can find it. All right, just hit F2 if you can't see them, and it's down here at the bottom. So I'm going to use the scale options again, just the vertical scale, and we're going to squash this down. It's going to be a little awkward to see here. I'll try to move my window out of the way. And again, we need this to be really thin because our faces on the model are really, really thin. So it's going to be hard to tell if it's perfectly straight. I'm just going to leave it like that. And we'll grab the next chunk, which is the outside. Same thing here, we're just going to have to squash it down a bit. And again, you want to get them as close to square as you possibly can. That looks fine, so we'll leave that, grab the next piece, which is the inside up here. Same deal, I'm just going to squash it down using scale until they look fairly square. And let's grab the bottom and the top here. I'm just going to relax these. And you can try relaxing some of the other pieces if you want to. I'll try it. Sometimes it starts to bend stuff, but I'll see. All right, that one looks like it works, so we'll just do these ones as well. It's a good idea to relax everything you can. It just kind of evens everything out. But I think that's fine. So again, I'm just going to use the rescale options here to kind of even the checker size out. And if you don't have that, just grab each piece and just kind of scale it quickly until they look like they're close enough. You can see it's not perfect even with the new option. Sometimes it takes a couple tries. So I'm just going to leave it. I don't want to spend too much time doing that. So I'm just going to stack these up into a pile. I'm going to give everything unique space, so I'm not going to let them overlap. So we'll just line them up kind of randomly. And I'm not sure how I want to pack these, but we'll figure that out as we get farther along. So we'll just move everything into a group. Again, I'm just going to push it out of the way so it's not near the 0 to 1. And we'll just close the relax box, close the window, close up the rollout, and exit isolation mode. And again, that's not perfect. You can see it's definitely got some distortion, but for the sake of speed, I'm just going to leave it. And we'll move to the next piece, which is the sphere here. All right, so again, into isolation mode, trash the symmetry modifier. Spheres can be a little bit tricky to map. There's really no good way to do it. So I'm just going to hack it up. So let's put on the unwrap UVW again. Just go to edge. I'm going to grab a center edge loop, maybe right here. Loop that all the way around, and I'm going to convert it to a seam. And you can see it's cut some weird ones in. So I'm just going to ignore those for now. Just grab any other vertical edge, loop that, convert it to a seam. And if you don't want to see this green display, just untick map seams over here under display, and it'll actually turn this off. And you can also turn the pelt seams off, or the peel seams, sorry. All right, but again, I'm just going to ignore it, and we're just going to basically cut it into 4 chunks. All right, so let's get the checker pattern on. Let's go to face, and we'll just grab a polygon in one section, expand our selection. I'm going to use pelt on this, so we'll open up the pelt box, pelt it quick, move to the next one, same thing. Just stretch it out quickly, and just move to the next one. All right, there we go. And it's still distorted, so we're just going to relax it quickly. So let's open up the relax box. Again, just take our amount up to 1, change our mode to face angles, and I'm just going to pull these out. All right, let's undo that. Let's make sure we have element ticked on, so we can grab the whole piece, and we'll just pull these out. I don't know how I really want to lay these out, so I'm just going to give them all unique space, and we'll just grab all 4 pieces and just relax them at the same time. All right, that looks decent, so let's just move them out. And again, I'm just going to grab them all and just push them up out of the way. If you want to, you can scale some of this stuff down. It doesn't have to be that massive, but again, I'm going to do that at the end, so I'll just leave it for now. And we'll close that. Close up the rollout. Let's take a quick look. And this obviously isn't ideal. We're going to have some pretty nasty seams, but when we texture this, we'll try to hide those as best we can. So we'll just exit again. Take a quick look, and you can see, as I mentioned, the checker size is drastically different. They're huge over here. So I'm going to wait to the end and kind of even everything out. But if you want to go piece by piece and just kind of even it out as you go, you can just do that by getting your map in the way you want, and then just use the uniform scale on all the pieces at the same time. So you can just take this down and make it smaller until it matched the previous piece. And that's typically up until now the way I did it. But that'll be up to you if you want to do it now or not. I'm just going to move on to the next piece, which is the little cylinder here. So again, isolation mode, dump the symmetry. We have a bottom polygon here we don't really need, so let's actually trash that. Just going to delete that out of there, and for this we can just split it. So let's put on the unwrap. Grab an edge, you can see it actually did one for me right here. I'm just going to ignore it again and just cut the next one up. And sometimes it'll display like this, but when you actually look on the UVs, it's not actually split. So again, I don't really know what causes that, so I'm just going to ignore it and just choose a different edge. Split it, and then we'll go to face, grab a polygon, expand our selection, we'll just do a cylindrical map here. Again, just make sure your gizmo looks like it kind of fits, and you can try the different align options until it matches up. That looks good, so let's turn off the cylindrical map, and we'll open up our editor window. Just turn off the background quickly. Let's put the checker pattern on here as well. And we'll just quickly stretch this out. So I'm going to change this to the horizontal scale and just stretch it out a little bit until they turn out kind of square over here. A little bit more. All right, that's good. So same thing, I'm just going to move it out of the way, drop it, and just close this up. Exit isolation mode. That looks okay. Let's actually take a look and see if this is a seam on our UVs before we move on. And yeah, you can see there's actually no broken seam in the center of the chunk. Even though it's displaying a one there, it actually wasn't broken. It just split the edge that it shows. So yeah, just be mindful of that when you're going along, that you don't have any green seams in the middle of your chunk. If you do, just weld the verts until it turns out like this. And you won't have any problems. And it is a good idea to obviously try to hide the seam as best you can when you're doing your mapping. And I put it at the back here, which is probably the least visible spot. If your seam's in the front, you can try to hide it when you texture it, or you can just rotate the piece a bit and kind of hide that back there. But that looks fine, so I'm going to move on. We'll start doing the box here in a second. I'm just going to do a save. Probably a good idea.